player he's already defeated in the current season. (1987 and 1992 were Jimmy White's title years in this tournament. More recently than that, he reached the final in 2000, at a time when many thought he was a spent force. And here he still is, more than a quarter of a century after that, here on a Friday night, battling to get a trip to Cheltenham for the final stages. It's a best of 7, and Jimmy White has got us underway. Sean O'Sullivan back on the tour this season for his 4th stint, having come through Q School earlier in the summer. Jimmy White is the only player to have played in every staging of the British Open. There is a belief that he didn't play in it in 1989, but it isn't correct. He withdrew during the tournament, but he had already played and won a match. So he has been part of every British Open that's been held since it was first staged in 1985.
Jimmy White 1.
(64 years of age. Just can't say it enough, can I? Turned pro in 1980, just after winning the World Amateur Championship. His application, which was how you got to be a pro in those days, had actually been accepted before he went to Australia and won the World Amateur. So immediately on the completion of that tournament, he was a professional. White's first ever match in the British Open. I'm sorry, this reference might go above the heads of a lot of people, but his first ever match in this tournament was played in the week that Band-Aid was knocked off the #1 spot in the UK. Anyone who is old enough to remember the mid-80s will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Blue ball. Six.
It was actually in the forerunner of this event, the old Yamaha tournament, that White made his professional debut. the way back in 1981. The win over Patsy Fagan, the former UK champion.
Jimmy White 6.
The previous meeting between these two that I was referring to was last month in the China Open qualifiers. And there were a lot of mistakes on both sides. White lost the opening frame, but then won 6 of the next 7. And towards the end, he started to play well, had breaks of 112 and 59 in the last 2 frames to see it out. He did then lose his next match against Louis Heathcote, so he won't be going to the final stages of the China Open. But in this Unibet British Open, this is the only qualifying round, so if you win your match in this round, you're on the way to Cheltenham. There have been 3 qualifying tournaments completed already this season, and neither of these players has made it through in any of them. But someone's going to tonight.
One.
32 years of age, Sean O'Sullivan. He was actually born on the weekend that Jimmy White famously missed that black, just a few balls away from becoming world champion. And it's a really important match for him, this, because I think the objective over your couple of years that you get on the circuit after coming through Q School is to finish high enough in the rankings to stay on for the following season. Now, he's got 2 years to get those points, but you want to try and get as many of them as you can early on when there isn't that immediate pressure, rather than
8.
trying to claim them when that pressure really ratchets up towards the end of your second season. And primarily, that means trying to get into the top 64. He's never been there in his career.
14.
Comes from Whitechapel in East London. When it comes to football, of course, he's very much North London. I was so thrilled when Arsenal won the Premier League title for the first time in 22 years back in May.
One.
He's a really good lad, Sean, and one of these guys who just loves the game, and one or two players, including maybe his namesake, who sometimes try to play it down and make out that the game doesn't really mean that much to them. He's not like that at all. And it's so refreshing. And of course, you can also say that about the vastly experienced opponent he's facing tonight.
28.
Played in the Championship League, only won one of his 3 matches in the first phase, O'Sullivan, so that was the end of that. We spoke about China, where he lost to White. Did win a match in the Wuhan Open against Mateusz Baranowski of Poland. He was 2-0 down before he'd potted a ball. Baranowski actually making a century to clinch 2-0. But then O'Sullivan won all of the next 5 frames, only to lose 5-2 to Huguo Shang in the next round. And he was 2-0 up against Jamie Clark last Sunday in attempting to qualify for the Shenzhen Open. Won the second frame on the black, but then didn't win any further frames. And in the last 2, Clark had a couple of decent breaks to finish it off. So at that point now where he's closing in on taking the frame. A little bit of a tester this, but nothing really stands out as being much of a problem from here. Knocked the black onto the cushion, but the pink is still available into 4 pockets, so there's enough there to get him over the line here. 56 in front. Indeed, this red will be frame ball. Obviously, you want a bit more and don't have to go through the stress of trying to avoid giving snookers away. But with that, O'Sullivan leads by 57. There's going to be more to follow. So the first frame, just as it did when they met in the China Open, is going to go his way. It's already a higher break than he made at any stage of their previous meeting last month. But it will go no further. So 62 in the difference. I think White probably will come back to the table. And just to prove me wrong, he's decided not to. So Sean O'Sullivan, off to a fine start, a break of 69, clinches the opening frame. Now, got a result to give you from the previous session. Bayou Lu has won 4-1 against Sahil Nayar. It was a match that took a while. No breaks over 50, but Bai pulling away to win 3 fairly close frames, really, from 1-all. And prevail 4-1. All the frames, really, in that match were close and a bit disjointed, which explains why it took so long to complete. And the fact that it did means Stephen Maguire and Liam Highfield have been delayed in their start. Elsewhere, the other matches all still in the opening frame. Ali Carter against Stuart Carrington, Robbie Williams against Hugo Shang, and Liam Davies against Craig Steadman. And also Li Pei Fan, former Scottish Open champion, against Hamad Mia. Usually in the qualifiers you know who you're going to play, or at the very least it's an either or if you get through. Not the case in this tournament. It's redrawn round by round. So whoever does come through won't know who they'll face in their opening match in Cheltenham until the draw is made on Monday. Off we go again then in frame 2. Well, a good bit out with the pot, and he's left a simple starter for O'Sullivan. And the red already developed a little, so if O'Sullivan can just manage to get the next couple of shots right, could find himself very quickly in a good position here. Been to the last 32 of our ranking event on 6 occasions, O'Sullivan, but he's only won one of those matches. It was 10 years ago in the Scottish Open when he beat Mitchell Mann, and he almost went further. He was a frame away from getting through to the quarterfinals when he led Udaloo 3-2, but then lost the next couple of frames. And with that, he was a 4-3 loser. He looked a bit out of sorts and a bit uncomfortable Well, he played white in the China Open qualifiers. He's had all those matches at Q School quite recently, but it's a very different feeling when you're involved in an actual ranking event qualifier against one of the most famous names in the game. And he didn't acquit himself well that day, but the early signs are really encouraging here.
O'Sullivan,
Looks very comfortable. He's got a few more matches under his belt now. Referee tonight is Tatiana Wollaston from Belarus. As I'm sure you know, is the wife of Leicester pro Ben Wollaston. He won't be going to Cheltenham for the final stages, having lost his qualifier to Fan Zhengyi. Another good positive sign there. And he's got a nice little angle here. Nudge some reds if he fancies it. Looking to win a match in the British Open for the first time in his career tonight.
8.
When it came back onto the circuit in 2021, he wasn't on the tour at the time. He's lost in the first round the last couple of years,
9.
or the next couple of years rather. A decider against Elliot Slesser and then a whitewash defeat to Ryan Day. And dropped off the tour then at the end of that season, so hasn't played in this tournament for the last couple of years. Get the sense from him that he's a very dedicated practicer. Of course, when you love the game as much as he does, it isn't a chore. But the thing is, if you're not a dedicated practicer nowadays, you simply haven't got a hope.
25.
I think it's all down to the massive influx of Chinese talent. They come to England, they just practice morning, noon and night. They're so dedicated, they've just raised the bar for everyone else.
32.
I wouldn't say the days when you can play badly in a match and still come through are over, but it's so rare now.
30.
In fact, it's much more likely that you'll play really well and lose. And put it this way, if you don't put the work in to get to a really, really good standard nowadays, you're not going to achieve wins on any sort of consistent basis. Well, looks as though this one has gone wrong.
40.
Always need a bit of good fortune when you're moving a number of reds, particularly with a bit of pace. Well, I think he may still have one. No, he does. He's fine. Oh, well, we'll never know now.
O'Sullivan, 40.
He certainly thought it went. And that shot has changed everything now in this frame, because White comes to the table 46-0 down, but with an easy starter and plenty to go at.
1.
So I mentioned that after beating O'Sullivan in the China qualifiers, he then lost in the next round to Louis Heathcote. Lost his opener to Zhang Yun 5-3 in the Wuhan qualifiers, but played pretty well. And then in the Shenzhen Open, he was due to play Ian Burns. The man from Preston had to pull out. I believe it was because of a back problem. But then White lost 5-1 in the next round to Fan Zhengyi, who played really well back on Monday. Fan had 63 and 119 in the first two frames and breaks of 73 and 69 in the last two. So White was well and truly up against it. Didn't play in the Championship League.
10. 11.
You just run out of things to say about how incredible it is that White has been around as long as he has. And yet there seems to be a constant supply of new ways of looking at it from a factual or statistical level. Again, going back to 80s music, Imagine by John Lennon was #1 when he made his professional debut.
18.
I remember Steve Davis saying once that it was quite something to find himself turning up at tournaments, and he was in the same age group as the dads of a lot of the players he was up against. Well, there are players on the tour now whose granddads are a similar age to Jimmy White. Incredible to think when he started out on the pro circuit, Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. Ronald Reagan had just been elected President of the United States. It was just a different world. No internet, no satellite TV, no mobile phones. Cliff Thorburn was the reigning world champion at the time.
33. 34.
Okay, so this is when things start to get pretty tricky. 12 behind. Black will reduce that to 5. He's got a nice angle here to go into those two reds just next to his cueing arm. But it's no use if you don't pot the black. And now it's his turn to leave O'Sullivan a red to right middle. Apart from this red, O'Sullivan himself still has to contend with the challenges of the other two. So a lot to be done here. Came to the table 12 in front. So has he played to leave himself the double into the right middle? It's certainly an option. That's what he's gone for, but never really got close.
O.Sullivan 8.
Thing was, he was unlikely to leave it on, whatever happened. That said, White not far from potting it anyway. Not White's finest shot. He's left a chance at this red. Very testing, though. Even if he gets it, remember O'Sullivan will still need the other red as well. So a different frame to the previous one. It was effectively just one big break that settled that in O'Sullivan's favour. This one looks like it's heading for a late scrap. It's one of those shots that, as a professional snooker player, can make you look quite silly. Trying to catch it very thin. You can easily end up not catching it at all. Well, I think he's left this one on, and I don't think White will be turning it down. With both reds now in play, this could be a big moment in this second frame. A little surprised he played it like that. Thought he might try to force it in. But I think he's got away with it because the red next to the cue ball is blocking the one to left middle. Could look at it and say, well, could all come down to who pots this next red, whichever one of the two it proves to be. I suppose that really depends on who pots it, because you do have that brown near the ball cushion. White would need that. O'Sullivan wouldn't. O'Sullivan looking pleased enough with how his evening is proceeding so far, and rightly so, I think. Yeah, he never really looked comfortable on that shot. He's left a red on to middle. Good news for him is he's knocked the other one onto the left-hand side cushion.
One. Yellow ball.
One good shot here, and it should be O'Sullivan's frame. If he can get that red into play. Yeah, it wasn't easy. It's turning into one of those frames, though, where even getting those couple of balls off the table and adding a few more points could end up making a big difference.
O.Sullivan 3.
Looking at the position of the balls now, the brown has come out from the ball cushion. I'd have to say, whoever pots this last red is going to be a big favourite to win the frame. That 19-point gap might not count for much in the end. Now, surely he hasn't left a gap between the yellow and the blue to get to the potting angle on the red. That would be extraordinary, but I think it may have happened. And nicely stroked in. And that's worthy of being a frame winner. And the likelihood is it's going to be. Black will take the lead to 27, so he'll just need the yellow. So a very different frame to the first one, but it looks as though the outcome is going to be the same.
10.
Sullivan has already won as many frames as he did in the whole match in a best of 11 against White when they last met last month. That really was incredible. You saw the cue ball come to rest behind the yellow and the blue. It looked as though White had got safe at first glance, but then another look showed that O'Sullivan could get through to pot the last red. It was an excellent shot, and he's gone on from there to take the frame. O'Sullivan leads 2-0. Yeah, I just wonder what they're discussing there, because White, I think, had already conceded the frame. Then the cue ball went in to the green pocket. And I believe that meant White was back to needing 2 snookers and was asking if he could play on. He's been informed by the referee, Tatiana Wollaston, that that option isn't there. And she's absolutely correct in that. if that's what the conversation was about. Now let's see what's going on around the other tables on this Friday evening in the Unibet British Open qualifiers. Ali Carter has won the first frame against Stuart Carrington. Hu Guoshang is going well, leading Robbie Williams 2-0. Liam Davies 1-0 up on Craig Steadman. And Lei Pei Fan has won the first against Hamad Mia. The match between Stephen Maguire and Liam Highfield was a bit delayed getting started. But Highfield has just won the first frame in that one against the former British Open runner-up. White is trying to win a match in this British Open for the first time in 5 years. Been 5 stagings of it since it returned to the circuit, and the only match he's won in the British Open in that time was against Aaron Hill back in 2021 at this venue. Lost in the first round for the last 4 years. And tomorrow, both of these players will be back trying to qualify for the English Open. 2 wins needed to get through to the final stages. Been good signs from White early on this season. I think he's at a stage of his career now when any match he wins is significant for him. He's already had 2 century breaks, which is 1 more than he managed in all of last season. But I think there might be a perception among some of the general public that White has been no good for years and hardly won a match in recent times. Well, it's just not true at all. And you think back to about 3 years ago, he had a wonderful run, including a win over Judd Trump in a ranking event, again at this venue. And he's been getting the 2-year wild cards to stay on the tour for around about a decade now. But as recently as 2023, he managed to stay on the basis of his own ranking and his own performances. Already under pressure here, though. A potential 5 frames to play. And White has got to win 4 of them. Sullivan's opponent in those English qualifiers tomorrow will be Sam Craigie in the lunchtime session. If he gets through, he'll face David Lilley for a place in the final stages. White will also be in action in the 1 o'clock session tomorrow against Kawai Chung of Hong Kong. Whoever wins that will really be up against it in the next round, because they'll be playing Changbing Yu, who's been in incredible form recently and played very well again, beating Stuart Bingham on this table this afternoon. It's hard to fathom how much snooker will already have been played this season before we even reach the end of July. Well, that's the modern game. And it's such a time of opportunity for these players. I was saying earlier, O'Sullivan's best run in a ranking event is to the last 16. Now, those stats don't include the minor ranking events, and one of those was the Riga Open back in 2014 when he got to the quarterfinals. And if he can get through to the yellow, and I think maybe he can, well, he's not so sure now. But if he can find a colour here and get back to the reds, well, he's played so far tonight. Could be a really good opening for him.
Four.
Well, that's pretty good. Still a bit of work to do to get into comfortable position, but we'll certainly settle for the outcome of that shot. Less so, that one.
O.Sullivan, 4.
And that really seemed to hold the key, because if he could have potted that, taken the black, got its back in its spot, could have been a really good opening. Bit of a loose one though from white. Yeah, he was down on the shot a very long time, and I don't think it helped him. Not often you see a player with bananas by his chair during a match. I remember Peter Ebdon once walking into the arena carrying a blender full of bananas that he'd mashed up. I think there was something else in there as well. Oh, he was up out of that very quickly. He knew he'd hit it all wrong, and he could pay quite a price now. But White really needs to start getting this going now. Really got to win this frame. And this is his chance to really get stuck in. Much could depend on how quickly he can get the black back on its spot. And the answer to that could be very quickly. Only won 3 matches last season. One of them was a really good one in the Wuhan qualifiers against the former world semi-finalist, Anthony McGill. He also won a qualifier in the English against Ka Wai Chung, who he plays in English qualifying tomorrow. And he beat Sonny Akani in the qualifying for the Welsh. But really to be winning any match at all after, well, only a few years short of half a century on the circuit. It's very commendable. Oh, that is not, though, and that's a very worrying sign for Jimmy White's many, many fans. That's a really bad miss. Sullivan out of his chair very quickly. Probably can't quite believe he's returning to the table so soon. What a chance this is. Well, he can't literally win the match at this visit, but really, if O'Sullivan could take care of this third frame here and now, it will be very hard to see a way back for White. And of course, you've got the psychological blow of White knowing these could all have been his. Had it not been for that really bad miss on the pink. Even for a player who's been through it all down the years, things like that do get in your head. He looks a completely different prospect to what he was like when they played in that China Open qualifier, around about 6 weeks ago. Looked unsure of himself, hesitant. But he's just bouncing around the table now. Loving being in front of the cameras, on the main table.
36.
And playing well.
37.
And it really is now that classic case of just don't do anything silly. All pretty routine stuff to get him from here to the finish line in this third frame.
44. 45. 52. 53.
He goes to 53. This red, this frame ball.
59. 64. 64.
So his second 60-plus break of the match. He's not quite there yet.
1.
It's 2 snookers needed to tie.
8. 9. 16.
This could be one of them. Well, not sure that's gone to plan at all. Looked for a moment as though he might even leave the red over the pocket, but certainly hasn't got the snooker. Oh, he didn't want that in, so that is the end of that. Sean O'Sullivan then, with the help of a break of 64, continues what's turning into a really fine evening for him. He only needs one more to advance. He leads Jimmy White 3-0. Elsewhere, still 1-0 in favour of Liam Highfield against Stephen Maguire. Ali Carter now 2-0 up on Stuart Carrington. He Guo Shang is leading 3-0 against Robbie Williams, who's a former British Open semi-finalist. And Liam Davies, the young Welshman, leading 2-0 against Craig Steadman. The other match going on is level. Lee Pei Fan and Hamad Mia at 1-1. 1987, Jimmy White's first British Open win, and although he was the higher ranked player going into that final against Neil Foulds, I think he went in as second favourite because Foulds was playing so well at the time, and indeed Foulds led 4-0. He was 8-7 up overnight, and then White dominated the last session. And 5 years later, White against James Watanabe built a big lead. The Thai player came back at him, but White saw it out. White has won 10 ranking titles. 4 of them came in that year of 1992. He's one of only 13 players to have reached double figures in terms of career ranking tournament wins. So impressive what he did that year, because he had won this tournament, he'd won the European Open, he was playing really well at the World Championship, had the 147 in the first round. Only the 5th televised maximum there had ever been. And then had a big lead in the final, but Stephen Hendry won 10 frames in a row to overtake him. The fact that White was able to respond to that by coming out right at the start of the following season, winning the Grand Prix and then the UK Championship, which he told me once he regarded as the high point of his entire career, to do that off the back of such a big disappointment was very commendable. Sort of shot he used to get with remarkable regularity.
I'm not answering this.
some news to bring you from the table right next door. Liam Highfield has made a 147 against Stephen Maguire. I told you he was 1-0 up. News has just come through that it was a maximum break.
One.
Well, that might just be the best shot we've seen in the whole match. And it sets O'Sullivan up with his first chance to win the match.
Eight. Nine.
Seems remarkable that we've now had 245 maximums in professional competition. And yet every time there's one, we still get that little ripple of excitement. A sense that it's a big moment. And I guess when you look at it, even 245, that is an absolutely infinitesimal percentage of all the frames of professional snooker that have ever been played. Incredible 24 maximums last season. And we've already had 4 in the current campaign. By this date last year, there had still been only 1 on the board, so only signs that that record could come under threat. We've had Michael Holt, Si Jiahui and Chang Bing Yu making maximums already this season before Liam Highfield. Great to see that for Liam. Came back on the tour last year after a 1-year absence, having prior to that been on for 14 seasons in a row. Comes from not far from here.
O.Sullivan, 14.
Guaranteed minimum £3,000 for whoever comes through this match. And of course, with it, 3,000 ranking points.
Foul. The miss. Jimmy White, 4.
He's made contact this time, but well, for a moment there it looked as though White was sizing up a potential red to the left corner. Not to be, though. Really looking forward, I have to say, to getting to Cheltenham in just over a month from now for the final stages of this Unibet British Open. It's a wonderful setting to drive into in the morning. You've got the racetrack there, and you walk into the venue, and there's so much history and memorabilia all associated with the National Hunt Festival. And the hall itself is an excellent venue. You walk out the back of the commentators' room, you have this glorious view over the racetrack and all across the surrounding countryside. But that's all to come in about 5 weeks' time. In the here and now, O'Sullivan has been left another chance. Yeah, it was such a tricky shot, wasn't it? Needed to be so precise and have a bit of good fortune to get in a colour, so it's not turned out too bad for White at all.
Blue ball. O.Sullivan 1.
So another long red for White to go at, but he's not had any great degree of success with those shots tonight. Has this time, though.
1. Yellow ball. 3.
Had a good chance in the previous frame. Bad miss on the pink. This isn't as good a chance, but he's got to try to make as much as he can from it just to get stuck into the match, give himself a little bit of a foothold. It's just not really got started for him this evening.
10. 11.
You can guarantee he'll give it everything he's got. People wonder why White keeps going. It certainly isn't for financial reasons.
Ping ball.
If he was to pack in playing tournaments and concentrate on exhibitions, he'd make far more, probably. But he just loves it and just wants the challenge. Comes to the end of his latest 2-year card this season, but as he might say himself, make no mistake, he will be setting himself the goal of staying on by right at the end of this season. It's going to take a huge upturn in form, but he'll keep trying.
18.
I remember in one of the more surreal moments of my life sitting with him in a cafe in Edinburgh during the Scottish Open a few years back as we tried to work out what position he was in terms of trying to stay on the tour via the 1-year list, which he ultimately managed to do.
24.
Oh, what on earth has happened there? Just seemed to go straight across. Although not comparable to the one when he broke down on the pink earlier. It's another chance gone for White. Still just can't force his way into the contest. O'Sullivan will be so eager to get this done now. Every win so vital for a player at his sort of stage. And he knows in a best of 7 it can always slip away from you. Can never really have that comfortable a lead. But suddenly things may have opened up for him here. He's got this red to the right corner. The black is now out into the open. That's assuming the red goes. His body language suggested he was lining up to pot it, but maybe a little bit of doubt. Sort of feels like if this red was on, he'd have been down and played it by now. Yeah, it was a bit of a misjudgment that from O'Sullivan, you might say, because the way he played that shot, there was a good chance he was going to leave the red on to left middle. As it turned out, it's not cost him anything. Might even give him the chance to play a good shot here. Put some pressure back on white. Well, he's actually gone for the pot to left middle. It wasn't a bad effort. Well, he can't be eyeing up a 3-ball plant, can he? That's exactly what he was looking at. Now, I'm not convinced that was even on. A lot of difference, of course, when you're standing right behind the shot, so we'll have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But white gets the benefit of O'Sullivan's mistake. Now, can he carve out something here? Because black is available now. It'll be onto both pockets if he can get it back on its spot. There's a bit of figuring out to do with the reds. Oh, but that's poor. That is very poor and very sloppy. And it's such a waste of a bit of a gift he'd been given. take a monumental effort to win frame and match at this visit, but he can certainly do a good bit of damage. Looks more like a situation where you try to build a bit of a lead and set yourself up for a good safety. Try and control the tactical duel from there and get back in. Let's not entirely rule out that he could turn this into a match-winning chance. We can rule it out now, though. Wouldn't quite say one last chance for White, particularly given the way the balls are situated. But he certainly needs to start making something happen soon. Even after all these years, he's still capable of being disappointed when he doesn't perform well. And when he beat O'Sullivan in the China Open qualifiers, the only win he's had so far this season. Played pretty well towards the end. There were good signs there. It's just not been his night so far. Well, little by little, it's just looking a bit more promising, this chance. The only thing is, you have to say, in fairness, after what we've seen from White this evening, just feels like he could miss almost anything. Yeah. That's a good pot on the pink into left middle. He missed another very similar shot by some margin just a short time ago, so He's building the lead here. Doesn't need to do a huge amount more now.
30.
So 28 in front with 51 left. Potentially just 3 balls away from clinching this 4th frame. Had a look at the blue. Don't think he can get through to that. Yeah, so it's not going to happen at this visit, but that's okay. He's built on his lead now. He's 29 in front. Only a couple of reds left, so very good chance to finally get his first frame of the evening. Oh, it's nicely played, and it's suddenly put white in quite a bit of trouble here. Both reds freely available. So he managed to make contact, but has he got it safe? Well, I think he might just have done, but the other one is on. One good shot here, and it's a definite match-winning chance. But as soon as the chance has come, it's gone again. And with white already 29 in front as he returns to the table, red and black would get him over the line. Ooh, but hang on, he's come. Well, he's okay. Looks like he might get stuck on the black there, but he'll be fine. So it looks as though Jimmy White is, at the very least, going to avert the whitewash. And so long as you can keep punching in a best of 7, you've still got a chance. You can never be so far behind that it looks an impossible task. And he's going to take the blue. So that means 35 in front with 35 left, but he's got this red over the middle, so
6.
should still be okay. Or not. he seemed to be relying on that red, but I didn't think it was a certainty. But even if O'Sullivan can pot this, remember he's going to have to get in and out of bulk to get on the black if he's to avoid falling into the snooker's required zone. Well, this looks like a pretty good effort. Is it good enough? Looks like he's gone too far. So does he go for the black? Or does he settle for the pink and try to get a snooker on the colours? Must be very tempting to go for the black, yeah, because if he can then clear up, he forces a respot. Oh, that's so unfortunate. He's played that really well. I think it was definitely the right choice of shot. But instead of going up and getting on the yellow, he's gone in off into the middle and has conceded the frame. So Jimmy White has got one on the board at last. Sean O'Sullivan still in a commanding position, though. He leads 3-1. What a night for Liam Highfield. He's had first maximum of his pro career, and he's now leading Stephen Maguire 3-0. He's just won the third frame, only needed one scoring visit to do it. Break of 84. Liam Davies and Craig Steadman level at 2-all. Leipei Fan leading 3-1 against Hamid Mia. And a couple of matches finished now. Huguo Shang winning 4-0 against Robbie Williams, player who's been to the semi-finals of this British Open in the past. And a 4-0 win also for Ali Carter against Stuart Carrington. Breaks of 64 and 91 for Carter in the second and third frames, and he won a couple of fairly close ones either side of that. Both players taking a bit of a breather, and O'Sullivan, as I was saying, still in a commanding position, but it can all change so quickly. You lose the next frame, and then all of a sudden it's only 3-2, and it's anyone's match again. So we could still be here for a while, yes? Enjoying the action on this Friday evening. We'll be back tomorrow as qualifying begins for the English Open. Different format for that. You've got to get through 2 rounds. Certainly these guys do anyway. They'll both be starting from round 1. And in terms of what we have to offer you tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning, Dylan Emery did so well in the recent Championship League. He'll be playing first season pro Paul Norris. And then Jimmy White will be back on this table to play Ka Wai Chung at 1 o'clock. 4 o'clock session will be Alfie Burden against Artem Zhuzhin, as I've been told today it's pronounced. And the 7 o'clock session on Saturday, Stephen Hallworth against Liam Davies. So all the players in action tomorrow will be trying to get through to Sunday's play, where they'll need one more win. And then next week it's the Shanghai Masters, which was a ranking event and it's been sort of repurposed in recent years as a elite and very lucrative invitational. There's quite a run of events coming up in China over the next while, because that will be followed by the China Open, returning to the circuit after a 7-year absence. Then a week after that, it's the Wuhan Open. And then we'll be back in this part of the world for the British Open, which these players are trying to qualify for here this evening. Then the English Open at Brentwood. Then back to China for the Shenzhen Open, new title they're playing for this season. And even after the Northern Ireland Open in the middle of October in Belfast, a few days later, he'll be back to China for the International Championship. And this is the season which brings us to the 40th anniversary of the first genuine professional tournament ever played in China. And Jimmy White was in it. Remember, it started with 8 players going over, 8 of the best in the world. And they all faced a Chinese opponent. In the first round, over the best of 3, White was the only player to drop a frame. Put it behind him, though. Went on to reach the final and lost to the late Willie Thorne. And as I recall, that trip to China came immediately after White had won this tournament for the first time. Saying earlier on, there are so many lines you can come out with which really underline how long White has been prospering in the game. And here's another one. It was 40 years ago this year that he won his first ranking title. A dramatic finish to the Mercantile Credit Classic against Cliff Thorburn. And the remarkable thing was, at that time, a lot of people were saying, he's been around a while now and he still hasn't won a ranking event. For a player of his ability, it's a bit of a monkey on his back. It felt like the long wait was over. Incredibly, here he still is 40 years later. So those first 5 years or so of his pro career that he didn't win a ranking title, just a very, very small fraction of the total time he spent on the circuit. And of course, he had won a number of other very good events prior to that, most notably the Masters in 1984. Back Back in 2026, he's got the first chance in frame 5, and nice angle here on the blue already if he fancies it to get into the reds. That's exactly what he fancied. Now, how's it turned out? Well, not great.
6.
Does have a red on. To the right corner. But where does he go from there? That's a disappointment for him. Got a good split on the reds in terms of getting into them and spreading them, but you still need that bit of fortune, and he didn't get it. Seemed to take a little deflection off the red and into the pocket.
O.Sullivan 1.
Well, he's just thrown in a few bad mistakes as the match has gone on. Looked very sharp and comfortable early on. Of course, White, who's been around so long, will spot things like that. So he'll know the importance of winning this frame and applying that unique pressure a player feels when he suddenly finds himself in danger of losing a match that he was in such a strong position in.
Blue ball. Jimmy White 1.
Just didn't hit that with any confidence whatsoever. Although he did win the previous frame, it wasn't the sort of frame win that's going to do much to boost your confidence. Well, that's okay. It's pulled up just in time for him to be on this red. It's over the left corner.
7.
The sharpness and composure of earlier this evening becoming a distant memory for O'Sullivan now. Indications there from the motion he made after the shot that he didn't feel he got the cue through properly. Classic sign of tensing up. if he can get through to the black here, then this suddenly becomes a very real chance. Get it back in its spot. Be available to right corner. If he can move away the red that's next to the black spot, it'll be available into both corners. Indeed, he might even bypass that by flicking that red out of the way here. So all of a sudden, things looking quite promising for white in this fifth frame. But you got to pot the red, and I'm not surprised to see him react like that. It's not petulance, it's not bad sportsmanship. It's just frustration at how the night has gone for him. And the fact that just as he looked to have a chance to really get back in with a genuine chance of winning, he's gone and missed a red. That should never be staying on the table. Now, what can O'Sullivan do with his reprieve?
Eight. Nine.
So 9 in front. He's got 4 reds
16.
in and around the pink spot. Can't win the frame with those. He can certainly take himself to the brink.
17. Twenty-four. Twenty-five.
And all of a sudden, that spring looks to be coming back into his step.
32.
The winning line is in sight. But the body language at the moment suggests he's excited by that,
30.
rather than intimidated by it. So I mentioned those 4 reds, which were in the open around the pink spot. Well, this is the last of them. Red and black will take him to 41 in front. Tantalisingly close to victory and a place in the final stages. So he's got this red along the cushion. If he can find a colour to follow it,
48.
that will be that. So it's going to be green. Supporters will be very happy with this because he's played well tonight. Lost his way just a little bit over the last couple of frames. Well, he's going to try to win it with the black into the middle. This for the match. Yeah, it always looked a little bit high. But it's a good break and it's put him in a very strong position. 42 in front, 43 left. White is playing SOS. He might feel like sending one out now. But he's got the opening red. The black should follow. Didn't seem to try any positional heroics there. Just had to make sure of the 7 points. If he missed the black, it was all over. Well, that's not turned out great. I think we'll see O'Sullivan have a go at this and he can put everything into the pot, because if this goes down, White will need a couple of snookers to tie. Still not over the line. That's twice now he's rattled match ball. First the black, now the red. And White keeps on punching. Now, does he try to improve his position on the scoreboard a bit here by sending the red round the angles and getting a snooker in behind the black? Or is the green impeding that option? Well, I'm not sure entirely what he was trying to do there. But whatever it wasn't this. So O'Sullivan, for the third time, faces match ball. And for the third time, misses it. be heartbreaking for O'Sullivan if he didn't win the match from here. He's very aware of that, although it's still an unlikely scenario from this position. He will feel great relief if he can get it over the line, and that shot might just have taken him a step closer. In the end, White gets nowhere near making contact, and all of a sudden, there's 38 in the difference, only one red left. White needs a snooker. O'Sullivan has the chance to play the classic in or over on this final red. I thought he might play it a bit slower than that. But this should be the end. I think White will shake his hand if this red goes down. Well, he may be an East Ender, but there hasn't been a great degree of drama for Sean O'Sullivan on his way through to Cheltenham. Victory over South London this evening. Sean O'Sullivan has played so much better than he did in losing heavily to White in China Open qualifying last month. O'Sullivan the winner by 4 frames to 1. He's on his way to Cheltenham for the final stages of the Unibet British Open. The 2-time champion Jimmy White misses out.